The morning sun cast a golden glow over Kensington Palace as Catherine, the Duchess of Cambridge, carefully folded tiny clothes into a small suitcase. Her 8-month-old son George sat on the nursery floor, babbling happily while playing with his favorite wooden blocks. This wasn't just any ordinary packing session. The Cambridge family was preparing for their first official tour as a family of 3, heading to Australia and New Zealand for 3 weeks. Prince William watched his wife organize George's belongings with the precision of a military operation. Bottles, diapers, favorite toys, and even a special travel crib had to be carefully selected. The palace staff had been planning this tour for months, but nothing could quite prepare them for traveling with a baby who would turn 1 during the journey. Catherine picked up George and held him close, breathing in his sweet baby scent. The thought of taking such a young child on such a long journey filled her with both excitement and nervousness. George had never been on a plane for more than a few hours, and now they were embarking on a journey that would take them to the other side of the world. The Duke of Cambridge had been on royal tours before, but this time everything felt different. He wasn't just representing the crown as a son and future king. He was now a father, and his primary concern was ensuring his family's comfort and safety throughout the demanding schedule ahead. As the final preparations were made, the media buzz around the tour reached fever pitch. Newspapers across Britain ran headlines about the royal baby's first tour, and television crews positioned themselves outside the palace gates, hoping to catch a glimpse of the young family before their departure. Inside the palace, George remained blissfully unaware of the attention surrounding him. He crawled around the nursery, pulling himself up on furniture and taking wobbly steps while holding onto his mother's hands. His bright blue eyes sparkled with curiosity, and his infectious smile melted the hearts of everyone who met him. The royal protection officers had spent weeks coordinating security arrangements for the tour. Traveling with the third in line to the throne required extraordinary measures, especially when that heir was still in diapers. Every location had been thoroughly vetted, every potential risk assessed, and planned for. Catherine's mother, Carol Middleton, arrived at the palace to spend time with George before the family's departure. As a grandmother, she understood the emotional weight of taking such a young child so far from home. She held George while Catherine finished the last-minute preparations, whispering words of encouragement to her daughter about the exciting adventure ahead. The nursery staff at Kensington Palace had prepared detailed schedules and notes about George's routines, feeding times, and favorite activities. These would be crucial for maintaining some sense of normalcy during the whirlwind tour. The little prince had a particular fondness for peekaboo games and loved when people made silly faces at him. Prince William spent the evening before departure reviewing the official schedule one more time. The tour would take them through major cities in both Australia and New Zealand, with carefully planned engagements that would showcase the family while allowing time for George to rest and adjust to the dramatic time changes. The couple had insisted on bringing their trusted nanny, Maria Teresa Turian-Barallo, to help care for George during the more formal engagements. However, they were determined to spend as much time as possible with their son, even during official duties. This tour would set a new precedent for royal families traveling with young children. As night fell over London, George was given his evening bath and put to bed in his familiar surroundings one last time before the journey. Catherine sat beside his crib, gently stroking his soft blonde hair as he drifted off to sleep. Tomorrow would begin an adventure that none of them would ever forget. The morning of departure arrived with typical British weather, overcast skies, and a light drizzle. The family's luggage had been loaded into several cars, including special equipment needed for George's care during the long flight. The royal jet had been prepared with a makeshift nursery area, complete with everything needed to keep a baby comfortable during the lengthy journey. As they prepared to leave Kensington Palace, Catherine wrapped George in a soft blue blanket and held him close. Prince William carried the baby bag, looking every inch the modern father despite his royal status. The protection officers formed a discreet perimeter as the family made their way to the waiting cars. George seemed to sense the excitement in the air, his eyes wide and alert as they drove through the London streets toward the airport. He had no idea that thousands of miles away, people were already preparing to welcome him with open arms, planning celebrations for his upcoming first birthday, and preparing gifts that would make this tour truly unforgettable. The flight to Sydney would take over 20 hours, with a brief stop in Dubai for refueling. The cabin crew had been specially briefed on caring for their youngest passenger, and the jet had been equipped with everything needed to ensure George's comfort throughout the long journey. As the plane taxied down the runway, Catherine looked out the window at the disappearing London skyline and wondered what adventures awaited her family in the land down under. George slept peacefully in his specially designed travel cot as the aircraft climbed into the clouds, beginning what would become one of the most memorable royal tours in modern history. The little prince was about to charm 2 entire nations, and his parents couldn't wait to share their joy with the world. The wheels of the royal aircraft touched down at Sydney's Kingsford Smith Airport as the Australian morning sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Inside the plane, Prince George had just woken from a long sleep, his hair tousled and his eyes bright with curiosity. Catherine gently changed his diaper and dressed him in a fresh outfit, a simple white romper that would soon become iconic in photographs around the world. Prince William peered out the aircraft window at the crowd gathered beyond the airport fences. Even from this distance, he could see the excited faces of people who had been waiting for hours to catch a glimpse of the royal family. Australian flags waved in the gentle breeze, and camera crews positioned themselves for the perfect shot of the family's arrival. The cabin crew had done an exceptional job during the long flight, helping to keep George comfortable and entertained during the journey. The little prince had charmed everyone on board with his gurgling laughter and ready smiles. Now, as they prepared to disembark, Catherine felt a flutter of excitement mixed with the natural protective instincts of a mother introducing her child to the world stage. George babbled happily as his mother carried him toward the aircraft door. The warm Australian air rushed into the cabin as the door opened, carrying with it the scent of eucalyptus and the distant sound of the welcoming crowd. This was George's first breath of Southern Hemisphere air, though he seemed more interested in the colorful ribbons attached to his mother's hair than the historic significance of the moment. The Australian Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, waited at the bottom of the aircraft steps alongside other government officials. Their faces broke into genuine smiles as they saw the young family emerge from the plane. Prince William descended first, his hand protectively on his wife's back as Catherine followed, carrying George with practiced ease. The baby prince looked around with wide-eyed wonder at his new surroundings. The bright Australian sun, the unfamiliar sounds, and the sea of faces all seemed to fascinate rather than frighten him. When a gentle breeze ruffled his blonde hair, he reached up to touch his mother's face, making everyone who witnessed the moment smile with delight. As they walked across the tarmac toward the waiting vehicles, George caught sight of a small Australian flag being waved by one of the airport workers. His chubby hand reached toward the bright colors, and Catherine adjusted her hold to let him touch the fabric. The simple gesture would later be described by newspapers as the moment Prince George truly arrived in Australia. The drive from the airport to their accommodation gave the family their first real look at Sydney. George pressed his face against the car window, leaving little handprints on the glass as he watched the unfamiliar landscape roll by. The Sydney Harbour Bridge loomed majestically in the distance, and Catherine pointed it out to her son, though he seemed more interested in the seagulls flying alongside their convoy. Their temporary home in Sydney was a beautiful residence overlooking the harbour, with stunning views of the Opera House. The staff had prepared a special nursery for George, complete with toys donated by local families and a crib positioned to catch the gentle harbor breezes. Australian children had sent handmade cards and drawings which decorated the walls of his temporary room. The time difference proved challenging for the young family. George's sleep schedule was completely disrupted, and he found himself wide awake at 3 a.m, ready to play. Catherine and William took turns walking the Harborview rooms with their son, pointing out the twinkling lights of the city and the boats moving silently across the water. During those quiet nighttime hours, George seemed particularly fascinated by the Southern Cross constellation visible in the clear Australian sky. His parents held him up to the large windows, and he pressed his palms against the glass, as if trying to reach the bright stars. These private family moments provided a peaceful contrast to the busy schedule that awaited them. The Australian media had been respectful, but enthusiastic about the royal visit. Newspaper headlines proclaimed, "Our little prince has arrived," and television programs counted down to George's first public appearances. Gift shops quickly stocked up on baby-sized Australian flag outfits and miniature stuffed kangaroos, anticipating the tourism boost that would follow the family's visit. Local businesses prepared special welcome packages for the young prince. A Sydney toy store created a custom rocking kangaroo with his name embroidered on the side, while a children's clothing boutique designed tiny outfits featuring Australian animals. The generosity and warmth of the Australian people was evident in every gesture. George's first breakfast in Australia was a family affair on the residence's harbor-facing terrace. As Catherine fed him his morning bottle, he kept turning his head toward the water, fascinated by the movement of the boats and the calling of the harbor birds. Prince William marveled at how quickly his son seemed to adapt to new environments, showing the same adventurous spirit that would serve him well in his future royal role. The protection officers maintained their vigilant watch while allowing the family precious private moments. They had worked closely with Australian security services to ensure every detail of the visit would go smoothly. The safety of the 8-month-old prince was paramount, but they also understood the importance of allowing the family to experience genuine interactions with the people they met. As the morning progressed, preparations began for George's first official appearance on Australian soil. His outfit had been carefully selected, a simple white shirt and navy shorts that would be appropriate for the warm climate, while maintaining the dignity expected of a royal appearance. Catherine had brought several backup outfits, knowing that babies could be unpredictable. The anticipation was building across both Australia and New Zealand for the upcoming tour events. Social media buzzed with excitement about seeing the royal baby, and local families planned special outings to catch glimpses of the visiting royals. George had already captured hearts before even making his first public appearance. The resident staff reported that the little prince seemed to be settling well into his temporary home. He had slept better the previous night and was eating normally, showing signs of adjusting to the time change more quickly than expected. His sunny disposition and easy smiles had already won over everyone who met him. As the sun set over Sydney Harbour on their first full day in Australia, the Cambridge family stood together on their terrace, George safely secured in his father's arms. The Opera House glowed in the evening light, and the harbour sparkled with reflected city lights. Tomorrow would bring their first official engagements, but tonight belonged to them as a family, sharing quiet moments in one of the world's most beautiful cities. The morning of Prince George's first official public appearance in Australia dawned bright and clear, with Sydney's famous harbour sparkling under perfect blue skies. Catherine had been awake since dawn, not from royal duties, but because George had decided that 5 o'clock was an excellent time to practice his crawling skills across the nursery floor. His internal clock was still adjusting to the Australian time zone, but his energy levels were definitely rising to meet the demands of his new environment. The venue for George's debut was the Taronga Zoo, specifically chosen because children and animals always made for natural, joyful interactions. The zoo staff had spent weeks preparing for the royal visit, ensuring that the animals would be comfortable with the crowds and that every safety measure was in place for their youngest VIP guest. As Catherine dressed George in his carefully selected outfit, a light blue shirt and tiny navy shorts, she could hear the excited chatter of crowds gathering outside the zoo. Families had been arriving since early morning, hoping to secure the best viewing spots. Children pressed their faces against the zoo fences, waving small British and Australian flags while their parents checked cameras and phones. Prince William reviewed the morning's schedule one final time. The family would tour the zoo's Australian native animal section, where George would have the opportunity to meet some gentle creatures up close. The zoo's education team had specially selected animals known for their calm temperaments around children: friendly kangaroos, a sleepy koala, and some colorful parrots that were used to performing for visitors. The journey from their residence to the zoo provided George with an entertaining car ride through Sydney's morning traffic. He sat securely in his car's seat, watching the world go by with wide-eyed fascination. Every red traffic light became an opportunity to wave at pedestrians, who often did double takes when they realized who was in the royal convoy. Upon arrival at Taronga Zoo, the family was greeted by excited staff members and a small group of local families with young children. George immediately seemed to sense the festive atmosphere, clapping his hands together and making happy, gurgling sounds that delighted everyone within earshot. His natural charm was already working its magic on the Australian crowd. The zoo director personally escorted the family to their first stop, the kangaroo enclosure. George's eyes grew wide with wonder as he saw his first live kangaroo, a gentle female named Matilda who had been specially trained for educational programs. Catherine held George securely as they approached the fence, and the baby reached out toward the curious marsupial with obvious delight. Matilda the kangaroo seemed equally curious about the small human visitor. She hopped closer to the fence, tilting her head as she observed George's excited movements. When the little prince let out a delighted squeal, Matilda's ears twitched, and she settled down near the fence as if understanding the importance of this meeting. The photographers captured the magical moment when George and Matilda seemed to recognize each other as fellow curious creatures. Next came the encounter that would dominate newspaper headlines around the world: George's meeting with a koala named Bruce. The zookeeper carefully brought the sleepy marsupial closer to the family, and George became transfixed by the koala's soft gray fur and round black nose. When Bruce yawned, showing his little pink tongue, George giggled so infectiously that even the usually composed royal protection officers found themselves smiling. Catherine carefully guided George's tiny hand to gently touch Bruce's fur. The koala remained perfectly still, seeming to understand his role as a diplomatic ambassador for Australian wildlife. George's expression of pure wonder and delight was captured in dozens of photographs that would later appear on front pages across both countries. The highlight of the zoo visit came when George was introduced to a group of colorful rainbow lorikeets. These vibrant birds were accustomed to interacting with zoo visitors, and they immediately took an interest in the small royal guest. One particularly bold lorikeet perched on the edge of Catherine's hand, bringing it close enough for George to observe its brilliant blue and green feathers. George reached toward the beautiful bird with careful baby movements, his mouth forming a perfect O of amazement. When the lorikeet chirped a cheerful greeting, George attempted to chirp back, creating a moment of interspecies communication that charmed everyone present. Prince William laughed openly as his son tried to have a conversation with his new feathered friend. The zoo's education team had prepared special information cards about each animal for George to take home, though he was currently more interested in trying to eat them than read them. Catherine carefully folded each card into the baby bag, knowing they would become treasured mementos of this special day. As they moved through the zoo, George's excitement continued to build. Every new animal brought fresh squeals of delight, and his animated reactions encouraged the animals to come closer. A group of school children who had been invited to observe the royal visit began following at a respectful distance, giggling at George's enthusiastic responses to everything he encountered. The zoo visit concluded with a special presentation from the children's choir of a local primary school. 20 young voices sang a gentle Australian lullaby while George sat contentedly in his mother's lap, occasionally clapping his hands in time with the music. His appreciation for the performance was evident in his bright smiles and the way he swayed slightly to the rhythm. Local families who had gathered to watch the royal visit were thrilled when Catherine and William took a few extra minutes to meet some of the children who had waited patiently. George seemed particularly drawn to other babies and toddlers, reaching toward them with friendly curiosity while maintaining his secure hold on his mother. The gift presentations at the end of the zoo visit overwhelmed the royal couple with their thoughtfulness. Local families had created handmade toys, painted pictures, and even knitted tiny sweaters for George to wear during the rest of his Australian adventure. Each gift was received with genuine gratitude, and Catherine made sure George touched each present, helping him begin to understand the generosity of his hosts. As they prepared to leave Taronga Zoo, George had fallen asleep in his mother's arms, exhausted by all the excitement and new experiences. His peaceful face, framed by the harbor and city skyline in the background, created the perfect ending to a morning that had exceeded everyone's expectations. The zoo staff gathered to wave goodbye to their special visitors, already planning how they would remember this day for years to come. Several animals seemed to watch the departing royal family with interest, as if they too understood that they had participated in something quite special. The drive back to their residence was quiet, with George sleeping soundly and Catherine and William reflecting on the morning's success. The Australian people had embraced their son with genuine warmth and excitement, and George had responded with his natural charm and curiosity. The tour was off to a perfect start, and the family looked forward to their upcoming New Zealand adventures. The morning of July 22, 2014, arrived with special significance for the Cambridge family. It was Prince George's first birthday, and he would be celebrating it on the other side of the world from where he was born. Catherine woke early to prepare for what promised to be an extraordinary day, one that would create memories lasting far beyond George's ability to remember them himself. The Royal New Zealand Plucket Society had organized a very special birthday celebration at Government House in Wellington. Local families with babies and toddlers around George's age had been invited to join the party, creating an intimate gathering that would allow the young prince to interact with children his own age while celebrating this important milestone. Catherine had carefully packed George's special birthday outfit, a cream-colored romper with tiny embroidered sailing boats, a thoughtful nod to New Zealand's maritime heritage. As she dressed her son that morning, she marveled at how much he had grown during their journey. The 8-month-old who had left London seemed to have transformed into a more confident, curious little boy during their weeks in Australia and New Zealand. Prince William arranged for a special birthday breakfast on the terrace of their Wellington accommodation, complete with locally sourced fruits and a tiny cake made by the resident chef. George sat in his high chair, more interested in smearing banana across his tray than eating it, while his parents savored these quiet family moments before the day's celebrations began. The venue for George's birthday party was perfect, a sunny room at Government House with large windows overlooking Wellington's harbor. The New Zealand staff had decorated the space with gentle colors and soft music, creating an environment that would be stimulating for the children without being overwhelming. Balloons in subtle shades of blue and cream bobbed gently in the breeze from open windows. 10 local families arrived with their babies and toddlers, each child carefully selected to be close to George's age and temperament. The parents were understandably excited, but had been briefed to keep the atmosphere relaxed and natural. This wasn't meant to be a formal royal occasion, but rather a genuine children's party where George could experience normal interactions with peers. When the Cambridge family arrived at Government House, George was immediately fascinated by the sight of other children his size. He had spent most of his life around adults, so encountering a room full of babies and toddlers was like discovering a new species. His eyes grew wide with interest as he observed the other children playing with colorful toys scattered across soft mats. The party activities had been carefully planned by early childhood development specialists. Soft play areas with cushions and gentle climbing structures allowed the mobile babies to explore safely, while quieter corners provided spaces for bottle feeding and nap time. George gravitated toward a collection of wooden blocks, immediately beginning his favorite activity of knocking down towers that others had built. One little girl named Emma, exactly 2 weeks older than George, seemed particularly interested in the royal birthday boy. She crawled determinedly across the playing mat toward him, offering a slobbery toy giraffe as a gesture of friendship. George accepted the gift with serious consideration before attempting to return the favor by offering her one of his wooden blocks. The highlight of the party was the presentation of a specially commissioned birthday cake, a small, baby-friendly creation made without sugar, but decorated with colorful fruit pieces arranged to look like the New Zealand flag. George's approach to eating cake was enthusiastic but chaotic, resulting in fruit pieces distributed across his face, hands, and the surrounding area. Catherine and Prince William mingled naturally with the other parents, discussing the universal challenges and joys of raising babies. These conversations provided a welcome break from formal royal protocols, allowing them to connect as parents rather than as representatives of the crown. The other mothers were delighted to share parenting tips and funny stories about their own children's developments. The gift-giving portion of George's birthday celebration showcased the creativity and thoughtfulness of New Zealand families. Hand-knitted jerseys, wooden toys carved by local craftspeople, and picture books featuring New Zealand animals filled a special collection that would travel home to Kensington Palace. Each gift had been made with love and represented the genuine affection the New Zealand people felt for their young visitor. One particularly special present was a traditional Maori blessing carved in wood, created by an indigenous artist who wanted to offer protection and good fortune for George's future. The meaningful gift would later hold a place of honor in George's nursery, representing the cultural richness of his first birthday celebration. As the party continued, George's natural leadership qualities began to emerge. Despite being one of the younger children present, he seemed to attract the others to whatever activity he was pursuing. When he discovered a toy piano, several other babies crawled over to investigate, creating an impromptu musical session filled with random notes and delighted giggles. The photographers present captured hundreds of images, but the most treasured shots were the candid moments of George simply being a normal baby enjoying time with other children. His genuine laughter as he played peekaboo with a little boy named Jack created images that would later be described as capturing the pure joy of childhood. The New Zealand Prime Minister, John Key, made a brief appearance to wish George a happy birthday and present him with a special gift from the country, a carved wooden sailing boat that represented New Zealand's proud maritime traditions. George immediately tried to put the boat in his mouth, prompting laughter from everyone present and confirming that despite his royal status, he was still very much a typical one-year-old. As the party began to wind down, some of the babies started showing signs of tiredness. George, however, seemed energized by all the social interaction and continued exploring every corner of the party space. Catherine eventually had to scoop him up as he attempted to crawl under a table to investigate some particularly interesting electrical cords. The farewell portion of the birthday celebration was both sweet and chaotic as 10 babies and toddlers were collected by their parents at roughly the same time. George waved bye-bye with increasing enthusiasm, having learned this skill during the tour and now applying it liberally to everyone he met. The birthday cake that George had enthusiastically deconstructed was packaged up to take back to their accommodation, though most of it had already been consumed or worn by the birthday boy. His cream-colored outfit now bore colorful fruit stains that would serve as permanent reminders of his special day. That evening, as Catherine gave George his bath and prepared him for bed, she reflected on the extraordinary nature of his first birthday celebration. Instead of a quiet family gathering in England, he had been surrounded by new friends in a beautiful country on the opposite side of the globe, creating memories that would be treasured by two nations. Prince William called the Queen to share highlights from George's birthday party, describing his son's delighted interactions with other children and the warmth of their New Zealand hosts. The Queen expressed her pleasure at hearing that her great-grandson was thriving during his first major royal tour and seemed to be developing into a confident, sociable little boy. As George drifted off to sleep in his travel crib, surrounded by his new birthday presents and wearing pajamas that still smelled faintly of fruitcake, his parents realized that this day had marked more than just his first birthday. It had been his introduction to the wider world that he would one day serve, and he had met that challenge with curiosity, charm, and the kind of natural grace that suggested he might just be perfectly suited for the remarkable life ahead of him. The final week of the royal tour brought a bittersweet mix of excitement for the remaining adventures and sadness that the journey would soon end. Prince George had become a seasoned traveler, adapting to new environments with the confidence of a much older child. His sleep schedule had finally adjusted to the southern hemisphere, though his parents suspected it would take weeks to readjust once they returned to London. The family's last major engagement was a visit to Rainbow's End, New Zealand's premier amusement park, which had been specially opened for families with young children to meet the royal visitors. The park's gentle rides and colorful attractions provided the perfect setting for George's final public appearance of the tour. The organizers had carefully selected activities appropriate for babies and toddlers, ensuring everyone could participate safely. George's reaction to the amusement park was pure magic. The bright colors, cheerful music, and gentle movement of the baby-friendly rides captivated his attention completely. His first experience on a mini carousel, secured safely in his mother's arms, resulted in delighted squeals that could be heard across the entire park. Each time their painted horse went up and down, George clapped his hands with increasing enthusiasm. Catherine and Prince William had grown more relaxed with public appearances as the tour progressed, and this final event showcased their evolution as royal parents. They moved naturally among the other families, no longer seeming concerned about perfect photo opportunities, but instead focusing on ensuring George enjoyed every moment of his experience. The highlight of the amusement park visit was George's encounter with the park's mascot, a friendly dragon named Goldie who had been specially trained to interact gently with very young children. When Goldie approached slowly and offered a soft, oversized hand for George to touch, the little prince showed no fear. Instead, he reached toward the colorful character with obvious delight, trying to grab Goldie's sparkly costume. Local families at the park were amazed by how normal the royal family seemed in this playful environment. Prince William helped other children onto rides, while Catherine shared parenting experiences with mothers watching their own babies discover the park's attractions. George seemed to thrive on the social interaction, babbling excitedly at every new person he met. The gift presentations at Rainbow's End included handmade toys and books from families across New Zealand who wanted to contribute something special to George's first birthday celebration. Each present was received with genuine appreciation, and Catherine made careful notes about each donor so proper thank you letters could be sent from Kensington Palace. One particularly touching moment occurred when a local family presented George with a memory book filled with photographs and messages from children across New Zealand. Each page contained drawings, photos, and simple messages wishing the young prince well and expressing hope that he would return to visit when he was older. George immediately tried to turn the pages, though his motor skills weren't quite developed enough for careful page-turning. As the afternoon progressed, George began showing signs of fatigue, but his spirits remained high. He had discovered that waving generated enthusiastic responses from crowds, and he practiced this new skill extensively, waving at everyone from park staff to fellow visitors to the seagulls flying overhead. His indiscriminate friendliness charmed everyone who witnessed it. The family's departure from Rainbow's End marked the beginning of their farewell tour of New Zealand. Over the following days, they made brief stops at significant locations, including a Maori cultural center where George was formally welcomed with traditional ceremonies. He sat quietly during the beautiful singing, occasionally reaching toward the performers as if wanting to join their harmonious celebration. The packing process for their return to London was considerably more complex than their departure preparations had been. George's collection of gifts from Australia and New Zealand filled several additional suitcases, and Catherine carefully organized mementos and photographs to preserve memories of their extraordinary journey. Every toy, book, and piece of clothing told a story of the warmth they had encountered. George's behavior during the final days showed how much he had matured during the 3-week tour. He had become more social, more confident in new environments, and more physically adventurous. The crawling baby who had left London was now pulling himself up to standing position and taking tentative steps while holding onto furniture. His parents realized that their son had literally taken his first steps toward independence while representing his country abroad. The farewell ceremonies at Wellington Airport were emotional for everyone involved. Government officials, tour staff, and many of the families they had met came to wish the Cambridge family safe travels. George seemed to sense the significance of the occasion, remaining unusually quiet and observant as people gathered to say goodbye. Local children who had become George's playmates during various tour events presented him with a final collaborative gift, a photo album documenting his entire visit from the perspectives of the families he had met. Each photograph showed George interacting with other children, exploring new environments, or simply being a happy baby in beautiful surroundings. The flight home to London provided time for the family to reflect on their remarkable journey. George slept peacefully for much of the trip, perhaps exhausted by 3 weeks of constant new experiences and stimulation. Catherine and Prince William reviewed photographs and shared memories of their favorite moments, already knowing this tour would hold a special place in their family history. As the aircraft descended toward London, Prince William looked at his sleeping son and marveled at the transformation they had all undergone. George had represented the crown with natural grace and charm, winning hearts across 2 nations without even trying. More importantly, he had shown the world that the future of the monarchy would be in capable, genuine, and wonderfully human hands. The arrival at Heathrow Airport marked the end of Prince George's first major royal tour, but the beginning of a lifetime of service and adventure. The media coverage of their return focused on the success of the tour and the positive impact George had made on Australia-New Zealand relations with Britain. His natural charm and authentic reactions had created a new template for royal family tours. Back at Kensington Palace, George's nursery was filled with treasures from his journey: toys, books, clothes, and artwork that would remind him of this special time for years to come. As Catherine unpacked the last of their belongings, she found the wooden sailing boat presented by the New Zealand Prime Minister and placed it carefully on George's bookshelf. That evening, as they settled back into their familiar routines, George seemed to recognize his home surroundings, but also appeared to be looking around as if expecting new adventures to appear at any moment. The confident, curious baby who had charmed Australia and New Zealand was now home. But his parents knew this was just the beginning of a lifetime filled with extraordinary experiences. The tour had proven that Prince George possessed the natural qualities needed for his future role: genuine warmth, curiosity about people and places, and an ability to bring joy to others simply by being himself. His first birthday celebration in New Zealand had launched not just his second year of life, but his career as one of the most beloved members of the royal family. As Prince William tucked his son into his familiar crib that first night home, he whispered promises of future adventures and travels that awaited them as a family. George had successfully completed his first royal tour, but his journey as a future king had only just begun. The little prince who had captured hearts across the globe was home safe, sound, and ready for whatever came next in his remarkable young life.